Buenos días a todos y a todas.
Thank you. Good morning to you all, to all the authorities. I'd like to welcome you to greet you happily. Good evening to everyone in Japan. I'll share my presentation. I believe it should be visible now. As Kaoru said, I'd like to introduce this climate strategy, the long-term climate strategy that we introduced last week, last year on COP26 as a new policy of state in Chile, climate strategy. This strategy is on a track of different policies that we've been developing in the past year and that have a road that allows, based on the commitments that we've made, to give viability and to give a sense of reality regarding the actions that we must take in the upcoming years and how the various sectors can supplement this project. This long-term climate strategy is one of the many policies, climate policies that we have in Chile, and one of the basics that we are supporting for this work. Is the framework law, climate change framework law that Carolina mentioned, and it's moving forward very well in the Parliament of Chile, and we'll have this law approved and will allow us to implement nationally the international commitments that we have and all the necessary policies to accomplish our commitments, our carbon neutrality goals, and to accomplish that Chile is a much more resilient country in upcoming years. The law project has, in its various articles, it has many definitions that allow us to move forward on climate policy in more practical terms. And in general, we have a goal of mitigation, which is carbon neutrality. At least at 2050, this neutrality goal, we can advance it based on a mandatory review that we must have and based on the advances that exist due to technology, and it will help us. According to science, there are goals and indicators of adaptation, and there are instruments of climate handling that have to do with control instruments and that have various temporalities, such as NES, which we updated in 2020, and the definition of the climate strategy, the long-term climate strategy, looking to 2050. The general idea, the scheme, the schematic that we want to define in the law project is the one that you can see on screen, and has as a basis the goal of carbon neutrality and resilience to 2050. How do we get there? Through instruments, one, the NVC, which has an intermediate goal. It has the mitigation and adaptation commitments that must be updated every 5 years. This is defined in the Paris Agreement. We also define it as a national policy in the law, and it also contains a long-term policy, which is the climate strategy that has the sectorial and regional commitments that will be associated to the NES commitments and that must be updated every 10 years. So there we have an arrival point, the carbon neutrality, how to get to carbon neutrality through the commitments of the NEC that we update every 5 years. And then if that has national goals, we go down to the sectors and the regions. We work on the various ministries, on the various files but also territoriality through the regional offices, and this will stream down through sectorial mitigation and adaptation plans that you see the commitments of each of the ministries, the sectors, and the regional plans, and the action plans that also contain the actions and the financing for all the regions to be able to fulfill their own commitments, and that must be in line with the sectorial and adaptation plans. So having these definitions at the central level with the various ministries, there will be a conversation with the territories regionally, the ministries that are integrated in the sectorial plans of mitigation and adaptation according to mitigation are the sectors that issue more, that emit more gases, and it will be the sectors that will have more impact in case of not having adaptation and implementation plans implemented. In addition to all that, we define in the law monitoring systems, report verification systems, and evaluation systems nationwide to be able to follow up and recognize if these plans are being fulfilled, and also to know where there could be more needs or difficulties to fulfill each of these commitments and goals. Bearing in mind that we have our NEC updated in 2020, we have the law that generates all this framework of public policy. And the next step, having the commitment of the NEC specifically for mitigation with the carbon budget in 2020, 2030 nationwide, that we need to have definitions in the sectors. And for that, the climate strategy, the long-term climate strategy comes to be comes to supplement the sectors and have the objectives and then the goals for mitigation and adaptation of the various sectors involved. This is born from, well, this is not, it's natural that each country will fall in this understanding that must be done. This comes from the Agreement of Paris in the Article 4, where it calls for parties to formulate and communicate their long-term strategy for low emissions. We, as I mentioned before, we have present our long-term climate strategy on November 3rd for the UN Commission for Climate Change. This is a result of a participating process that had a close collaboration between the public and private sectors, the various sectors, and also very importantly, with the support of the civil society and the entities and the scientific committee that backed us up according to our commitment and all the goals that we're having that are aligned. The great thing in this is that it defines the carbon neutrality road to 2050. There are 400 transitional goals based on science to reach this goal. UNIS defined the goals and the commitments nationwide. This strategy defines the sectorial limits for the first time according to emissions, to carbon emissions, and to fulfill the goals. The sectors must be based on the 5 building blocks of the strategy, which is climate governance, cost effectivity, the social pillar that allows that all the actions defined in the strategy have benefits to all the country, and that all the definitions are also based on science. The content, I would like to go deep on this, but this strategy has to do with what it based on our vision to the 2050, the route to become carbon neutral, to become resilient in mitigation and adaptation, the various sectorial contributions and the integrated components, the handling of territoriality at the regional and local level, and the measures and cost efficiency that must be that were defined for each of the sectors. All of this is based on the curve that our update was based on in 2020 that has as a goal to get to carbon neutrality in 2050, and that shows us that to accomplish that we must have our captures and our absorptions. But on the other hand, we must work stronger on decarbonization, and mobility, on sustainable industry, on the green hydrogen and energetic efficiency. Those are the great topics that are described in the long-term climate strategy and that show that are based for each of the goals that were decided by the sectors. In addition to that, and that the same way we show through the ICT for 2020, we have a definition of cost effectiveness of various measures that they were evaluated that showed us what measures would be more cost efficient in time and what we could do early and that we could avoid. So going back through the law, we have defined that we must fulfill carbon neutrality at least in 2050. And on the other hand, we have a definition regarding the NSE that exists in capture goals and carbon budget. So also on NES, these budgets that are nationwide, we have a downwards run to sectorial budgets that, as you can see in this, as you can see in the various sectors and ministries that come to take authority on how to make this commitment. We must define through the negotiation of these sectors to define what is the commitment of the national budget in this file. After having these, we would have to define how to define this for each sector, and this is accomplished through various objectives and goals that you can see on screen. Some examples, for example, is for the energy sector, and objective is to reach low carbon for 2050. And here we also define a series of goals that have in the strategy the various sustainable development objectives that are impacted by the fulfillment of each of these goals. The mining sector also can be an example, and the same. All of this can be reviewed with more attention for each of the interested parties that are looking how to support the fulfillment of these goals, how to help and find the measures that will take us to carbon neutrality and fulfill the carbon budget for both national and sectorial, and that can give review in each of these goals and objective of each association. The framework law project will have will scale down to each of these objectives and goals, and that will notice how the quantification of the reductions and needs of each of these goals to be able to account how we would, and that's why there's financing associated to each of them. Final conclusions. Chile has very ambitious commitments in 2020, where we have the commitment of mitigation. We have the carbon budget for 2030 or 2020-2030. We want to have fulfillment. We have a conditioned goal to reach reduction of 45% too, as science demands. So that's why we need support, both finance and technology, to increase this ambition. And our strategy, long-term strategy, defines the sectors and actions necessary to accomplish that. We have clarity on how to accomplish this commitment. It is not a commitment defined without having actions and necessary evaluations to define it. We also recognize that based on these solutions, not all actions and commitments have the same cost or have the same time to be implemented. Each have particularities regarding cost efficiency, in reduction of emissions, and the benefits they may bring regarding the adaptation and the times that they can be implemented. We also understand that there are possibilities to make implementations faster that may be very expensive or that may be implemented, but we need international support to fulfill these goals. And finally, the next step that will allow us to nationally and internationally to have better clarity is the sectorial mitigation plans that are the ones that will define the actions, quantified actions to fulfill the sectorial budget and the national budget. And this will be prepared in the upcoming year. Thank you.